The Zambia Institute of Chartered Accountants, Zica, is a self-regulated membership body for the accountancy profession in Zambia and was established under the Accountants Act of 1992, which was repealed and replaced by the Accountants Act No. 13 of 2008. Its mandate is to promote the accountancy profession through the regulation of the accountancy profession, which covers admission, monitoring of the behavior and performance of accountants. Did you know that Zica membership is mandatory for all expatriates and Zambians performing finance and audit functions? It is an offense under the Accountants Act of 2008 for an employer to employ or engage an individual as an accountant when such a person is not a registered member of Zica at either fellow, associate, graduate, licentiate, or technician level of membership. If found, both the employee and employer commit an offense and are liable upon conviction to a fine not exceeding 500,000 penalty units or to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 5 years or both. The Institute will be carrying out both remote and physical compliance audits on all accountants countrywide to ensure individuals performing finance and audit functions comply with the provisions of the Accountants Act of 2008. Hire a registered accountant to avoid enforcement actions. For more details on Zica membership, kindly contact our membership department on email membership@zica.co.zm or mobile +260 979 794 208. The Zambia Institute of Chartered Accountants, a reputable leader in developing finance and business professionals.
Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us for this 6th edition of This Day. I'm your host. My name is Andrew Mwansa. Finance and National Planning Minister Dr. Stombeko Msokotwane did present a 253.1 billion kwacha proposed national budget for the 2026, an increase of 36 billion from 2025 allocation of 217.1 billion kwacha. In his presentation to Parliament on Friday, Dr. Msokotwane said the 2026 plan, themed consolidating economic and social gains towards a prosperous, resilient and equitable Zambia, represents 27.4% of GDP and aligns with the 8th National Development Plan. The budget will be financed through domestic revenue and external sources, including grants. On tonight's edition of This Day, I'm privileged to be joined in by a team from Zica, one of them being President of Zica, Mrs. Yande Siame Mwenye. Madam President, good evening. Thank you so much for making time to be part of the show tonight.
Andrew. Thank you for having us.
I'm also privileged to be joined in by the Zica Tax Committee Chairperson, Mr. Nathan Mutale. Mr. Nathan Mutale, good evening. Thank you so much for making time to be part of the show tonight.
Good evening, Andrew, and good evening to the viewers.
Well, before we can get down to the issues in the budget, allow me to begin with giving you an opportunity, Madam President, to briefly highlight Zica's mandate and how the Institute contributes to matters of national and economic importance.
Thank you very much. So the Zambia Institute of Chartered Accountants, Zica, was created by an Act of Parliament in 1982. And the sole purpose of its creation was for the regulation of the practice of the accountancy profession in Zambia. In addition to that, we offer training as well. And the most important thing I would say that we do is we also advise government on issues of the economy or issues that relate to the accountancy profession. And talking about the budget, I'll take this opportunity to just talk about how we successfully transmitted the national budget. That is something that we do every year as part of our mandate, and we did have a successful budget analysis night. So these are some of the things that we do as an institute.
Mr. Mutale, from Zica's standpoint, has the 2026 national budget adequately addressed the key economic and social challenges facing the country today?
I can say yes and no, because as you and we'll delve into that as we progress into the program. But one thing I must mention is that resources are scarce, so the government can only do so much with limited resources. So as we progress, we'll delve into that deeper. Thanks.
Well, it's people say that, or stakeholders, have described this budget to be, one of the most highly budget. It's pegged at 253. Last year's budget was at 217.1 billion. Obviously, there was that supplementary budget of 33 billion, but still, this one is one of the biggest budgets that we had in the history. But also, one critical component of this budget is that the majority of this budget will be domestically mobilized. That means that we, the Zambian people, are the ones that are footing this budget. And perhaps maybe we can pick it up from that point. How important, Madam President, is a country financing its own budget when we talk about majority of its of its allocation coming from the revenues that have been collected inwardly in the country?
It's when you look at it, what Minister did announce is that 80% of the budget, at least 82% to be precise, would be funded locally. Now, from a financial perspective, it means then you're looking entirely within. So meaning whatever you're doing has to work. And one of the issues that will be critical to look at is that fiscal discipline. We don't want a repeat of what happened in the current budget, where we have a supplementary budget. We can't afford to have that next year. So whatever needs to happen, needs to happen. And one of the things that Minister did allude to, yes, he did speak to the figures, but we've seen a lot of issues around policy, and the budget this time is touching on almost every area. So it's not the usual taxes where we say, oh, there's tax here, tax there, this has been reduced, or concessions here. There are a lot of things that are coming into play, and it cannot be looked at in isolation without looking at the 5-year period that we're coming from. A lot has happened. We have the 8th National Development Plan, which is actually coming to an end. So what we need to ask is what worked, what didn't work, and if things didn't work, why didn't they work? So those are some of the answers that we're looking at. But from a domestic perspective, we have to see where these resources are going to come from, and fiscal discipline is paramount.
Fiscal discipline is paramount.
Just to add on to what Madam President has said, maybe break it down for the layman out there, whereby financing a budget, say 82% internally, it means to get to 100%. We're not at 100%, we're at 2%. From where we're coming from, I think by 2021, the financing was about 55%. So it means the rest had to be borrowed. I think it is a good thing that we're looking internally for solutions regarding the 2026 national budget. Thanks.
Also, one of the critical things that we find in this budget is the fact that 1/3 of this budget is going towards debt servicing or debt dismantling. Obviously, this comes from the fact that the President, when he opened the 5th session of the 13th National Assembly, announced that we've restructured about over 90% of our debt has been restructured. And from that economic point of view, Madam President, what do you think would be the impact, of debt restructuring, or can I say debt servicing on this budget, owing to the fact that also part of the majority of this budget is going towards debt servicing?
Before Madam President comes in, it's okay, can I go ahead? Thank you, Madam President. Looking at the issue of debt servicing, and we have to look at where we're coming from. Remember, we were actually downgraded because of having accumulated huge debts. So we're at a point where we can't afford not to borrow. So it's a case where we have to go again and borrow and then live to fight another day. So debt servicing, I think it will be important after the restructuring. It will be also necessary to see, so that's why it comes to 100%, because right now we are at something like 92% when I last checked. Thank you, Madam President.
Well, debt servicing is actually, it's key, and the debt restructure did provide a lot of relief. And that's why we celebrated and we congratulated the Minister of Finance and National Planning, because it then meant that we now have a bit more wiggle room to be able to provide for the social needs that we have as a nation. But then some of the restructuring that has happened, essentially, there's a difference. When you restructure, you are extending the tenure for some of these debts. it doesn't mean the debt has been cancelled. So we are just kicking the can. Now, if we're kicking the can to 40 years, who is going to pay that debt? So ideally, it means our children or my grandchildren who have to pay the debts that we're incurring now. Another aspect that's been brought about is now government cannot just borrow without going to parliament. So they need to have that parliamentary approval. But even with that, we have to keep it at concessional rates, almost 0% if it's possible, but it has to be kept to a minimum. And as we look at servicing debt, we have to remember the local suppliers as well. There's been a far cry for the local suppliers, especially on the copper belt, that have not been paid. We also have the retirees that needed to be paid. So by all means, as we dismantle the fuel debts, let's take care of these other players as well. Yeah.
Now, considering past fiscal performance and prevailing economic conditions, how realistic are the government's revenue projections and what risks should be considered, Mr. Mtano? Okay,
I think what will make this budget work and those revenue targets, ZRA will be key as the body of government that collects revenue on behalf of the government. And for them to achieve that, I think compliance again will be key. So we would like to commend actually the Revenue Authority so far with the programs they're doing, such as taxpayer education. They do offer online trainings which are free to educate taxpayers on how to be compliant. So once you have a compliant citizen, then e-collection should be easy. I think, I don't know if you want to talk about
maybe just to weigh in on that. We noticed the introduction of the smart invoicing by the Zambia Revenue Authority, and this has brought, I believe, circa 20,000 taxpayers into the net. So this is a good thing. But then what we continue to bemoan is when you look at these taxpayers, in there it's a mixed bowl. You have the bigger organizations like the mining companies, manufacturing, the SMEs, everyone is in the same boat. Now what this means is the SME needs to have maybe a bit of leeway for them to be allowed to be compliant. Those are some of the pronouncements that we'd like to see. And then again, as we look at smart invoicing, a fantastic initiative. But we can't ignore the Financial Intelligence Center report, which continues to talk about the illicit flow of funds. How are these funds leaving the country? Why aren't we able to trap them or tap into these resources that are obviously probably from the informal sector? And then the other area that we had hoped to see is the broadening of the tax net, which is what we continue to talk about as Zica. And to speak to that, we look at digital services. There's a lot that is going on online. All of us, even around this table, are buying goods and services online. Who's taxing those entrepreneurs? Those are some of the questions that need to be asked, or initiatives that can be looked into by the Zambia Revenue Authority, because they do have an onerous task. 82% is not a small amount. It's a lot. But what we observe is it's the same players that are continuously being taxed year in, year out.
Well, the minister also mentioned of the very thin, and he also admitted the fact that they're trying to find mechanisms on how to tax the informal sector, which has been very difficult. And like you said, Madam President, the fact that 2% of our budget is going to be domestically mobilized, this means that the same tax base that we've been collecting these resources from is what is going to finance this particular budget. Where do you think is the biggest problem really in us as a country finding mechanisms on how to tax the informal sector?
That is a very good question. Sometimes it's the policies that we have in place. I'll give you a very maybe outlandish example. We all know that there's cryptocurrency, and we've had people in Zambia trading, but I'm yet to see a paper from Bank of Zambia on how they are taxing that area. Last I checked, it was still under, I think, research and whatnot. So sometimes we see these things happening, but we need to build capacity. And that is one of the challenges we face being where we are as a nation, is sometimes we cannot allocate the necessary resources into those areas that we need to grow to be able to widen this tax base. But it can be done, and we're hoping to see policies around that. Perhaps another area I can speak to. In Minister's budget, he spoke about we are on our way to meeting that is it 3 million metric tons of copper? But we have other resources. We are a resource-rich nation. So while we focus on copper, we've heard there's gold mining, but we don't see the statistics. What's happening in that area? And this is some of the information that we need to see to be able to appreciate. Is it part of this 82%? Is it part of the budget? And those are the questions that we are asking, because it's not just copper. We've got other resources as well, and we should be able to tap into those. And we hope we'll see that.
We'll see that to happen. Samtali, would you like to add something?
Just to add on the issue of artisanal mining, where gold is concerned, okay, it's public information out there that actually most of this trade is done with the United Arab Emirates. So like Madam President has alluded to, it would be good to see a report on the transactions which have happened between Zambia and the United Arab Emirates. Moreover, we have a double tax agreement between Zambia and the UAE. So what basically, it's easy for us to extract information using the DTA, because there's a provision in there, and then we can also even get as far as bank accounts of the individuals who are trading in this gold and the like. So that is my addition.
We earlier spoke about broadening the tax base, Madam President, and obviously tax compliance and broadening the tax base remain, recurring issues. I'd like to find out from you what specific measures in the 2026 budget address this, and what further reforms would your organization, Zica, recommend?
So, for example, like Nathan has alluded to, we now see that with the artisanal miners, the threshold has been raised. We're also seeing some relief for the SMEs. This allows this particular group to be compliant. Why? Because they feel that they are not being held by the neck, constantly filing their returns and having to pay taxes. But also, it helps them manage their cash flows. Because you'd imagine, what was it before? Is it 500,000, the threshold?
800,000.
800,000 for artisanal miners. Now it's moved to 5 million. That is significant cash flow in the hands of the small-scale miner and the artisanal miner. What has been a challenge is sometimes there are too many, there's too much bureaucracy around what needs to happen for small entities, particularly, I'll speak to the MSMEs, to be compliant. And that's where we see loopholes. But now, there are pronouncements that have been made that are favoring this environment. And by the way, our economy cannot grow with the MSME. That's why the focus needs to be on them. We shouldn't just focus at looking at the international investors, but we need to focus on our own homegrown. The way we are providing for the budget domestically, these resources are coming from our local SMEs. They keep their money here. It doesn't leave the country. So we need to focus on them.
And just sorry to go back to the issues of domestic mobilization of these resources. Others, Madam President, argue that there's no country which has developed by overtaxing and overburdening their citizens with a tax. We earlier spoke of the fact that we've been struggling as a country to add the informal sector, on taxes, and it therefore means that it's the same people that have been, have been paying tax. And if we have to collect more tax, then it means that we have to find other means of taxing these very people that, we are taxing. And so, what is your stance on the relationship that exists between growth of the country and ensuring that the people that this country still is serving are not overtaxed to poverty?
No, you raise a very cardinal question, and it has been felt like we do pay a lot of taxes. Maybe it's because it's a smaller pool, and that's why we're saying maybe if we widen the net, then this burden can be shared out a bit more. But yes, our taxes are quite onerous. You're talking about 37.5%. That is high by any standard, and we've got other things that we have to pay taxes on. The other issue that continues to be a concern is stakeholder engagement. In this year alone, we had 2 surprises. We had a January surprise on the 1st, the advance income tax. And then we now have this minimum alternative tax. I don't remember Zica being invited by the Zambia Revenue Authority to discuss what the impact of this would be. And we are the accountants. We understand taxes. We understand finances, but we have not been invited to the table. And yet we are the same ones that are developing financial strategies for different organizations. We provide financial advice and insight, but we are not being brought to the table. So that is a big issue. And this is affecting not just the smaller companies, but it's across different sectors. But sometimes if we are able to understand, sit around the table and see how this can be thrashed out, maybe we'll see more results. Yeah.
Well, I guess you're just joining us. You're watching a special edition of This Day where we are analyzing the budget which was presented last week Friday by Minister responsible for Finance and National Planning, Dr. Stakeholder Mskotwane. We'll take a break. When we're back, we'll discuss more.
The Zambia Institute of Chartered Accountants, Zica, is a self-regulated membership body for the accountancy profession in Zambia and was established under the Accountants Act of 1992, which was repealed and replaced by the Accountants Act No. 13 of 2008. Its mandate is to promote the accountancy profession through the regulation of the accountancy profession, which covers admission, monitoring of the behavior and performance of accountants. Did you know that Zica membership is mandatory for all expatriates and Zambians performing finance and audit functions? It is an offense under the Accountants Act of 2008 for an employer to employ or engage an individual as an accountant when such a person is not a registered member of Zica at either fellow, associate, graduate, licentiate, or technician level of membership. If found, both the employee and employer commit an offense and are liable upon conviction to a fine not exceeding 500,000 penalty units or to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 5 years or both. The Institute will be carrying out both remote and physical compliance audits on all accountants countrywide to ensure individuals performing finance and audit functions comply with the provisions of the Accountants Act of 2008. Hire a registered accountant to avoid enforcement actions. For more details on Zica membership, kindly contact our membership department on email membership@zica.co.zm or mobile +260 979 794 208. The Zambia Institute of Chartered Accountants, a reputable leader in developing finance and business professionals.
Well, thanks so much for still staying with us. You're still watching this episode of This Day. We're looking at analyzing the 2026 national budget and some of the key issues that came out of the minister's presentation of this budget to Parliament. Let me begin off again, back to you, Mr. Mtali. The macroeconomic objectives for this budget are very clear, and others have criticized that we've been making these objectives, yet we don't even attend them. We have an objective of attaining a 6.4% of GDP growth. In this budget, we have an objective of arresting inflation between 6 to 8%, which we've never, reached. I'd like to find out from Zica's, position, are these realistic targets that we are setting for ourselves, and why do we consistently, in each budget every year, we put these as our minimum targets?
That's a good question, Andrew. So regarding the attainment of real GDP growth of 6.4%, we feel this is attainable. Remember, sometime mid-year this year, IMF has actually rated that to achieve 5.8%, but it looks like we even exceed the 5.8%. We should be looking at closing at about 6.6%. Reducing inflation to a single-digit rate looks like I think this is also attainable in 2026. Why do I say so? Because currently inflation was at 15.1%. It has reduced as we speak today to 12.3%. And then the estimate is that it will close at 11.1%. So come January 2026, if we open at 11.1%, we have an entire 12 months to try to reduce it to a single-digit figure. So I think the macro objectives set look like they can be very much attainable.
Very much attainable. So while people, could be excited with those numbers, I think what people much more care about is how do these numbers translate to the living conditions of our people. So what is the relationship between those numbers and an improvement in people's lives?
So I'm sure you've hosted some people in this program who have said when they're explaining GDP, inflation, some callers will call in and say, yeah, I won't eat GDP, I won't eat inflation. And they're like, so what really happens is that I think as a nation, we need to, because even this 6.4 GDP target, we need to drill down which sector is contributing to this GDP. Mainly to be by mining because of the boom in mining, and then because we're looking to attain the 3 million tons target of copper production. But further to that, we should drill down and just have a report on job creation. The only way you can know if this is trickling down to the common man is if there's a report to show, okay, in this quarter, there's this production which has happened, how much of this has gone to job creation, what new jobs have been created, and the like. I think that's the only way you'll be able to trace if this is trickling down to the common man. Madam President.
Madam President, before I can touch on issues of CDF, maybe the same question, to you around reconciling economic growth and perhaps economic development or human development index, if you like. Why is there a mismatch, really? There's economic boom, but yet people's lives still remain the same.
Yeah, there is a mismatch because when we look at the population of our country, the widest is at the bottom. So how many people are having 3 meals a day? Those are the questions we need to ask. How many people are able to support, provide or get good health? These are the questions that we need to ask. How many people in a household are getting more than what should be in the food basket? I can't remember what the figures are, but I think usually there is a projection that is done by one of these NGOs, and they'll give us an indication of how much a household needs to survive every month. So if this figure is 600 to 800, are there people who are able to afford that? If so, how many of them are they? These are the figures that we need to see. Because if I go outside the street and I talk to people on the street, not people in offices wearing suits like yourself and I, Andrew, those are the real Zambians out there. What is life looking like? I can go to a private hospital when I'm not well. But what about those going to government hospitals? Is there medicine in the hospitals? Are they being seen by doctors that are being paid their salaries? These are the questions, these are the real issues that need to be looked at. And sometimes we don't have those statistics coming through. Even when we look at the budget like this, how much of this budget is meeting the ordinary Zambians' needs? And that's, I don't really have that question because I'm not qualified in that space to be able to get those statistics. But we'll hear from our other stakeholders to see what they come up with as they analyze these things.
Talking of the issue of statistics, and I think we should, even you, Andrew, I think the power of what the media houses do, the power of information, I can attest to something. I had a situation where I was driving, I was with my wife, and then a person was selling brooms, you know what I mean? So she opens the window, she says, how much is that broom? And then the person was selling gave her a figure. And then she screamed, you mean a broom is this much? And then we asked, why? And then she says, inflation is the dollar. You see, because there's information out there that the dollar is high, and they all know that the dollar is high. So the excuse they gave was the dollar. Just like Madam President said, these statistics and numbers, like we say, job creation, these numbers need to be made available. And all this to do with JCTR, like Madam President has alluded to, they need to be followed through to see how we can improve those numbers per household.
And also maybe just to weigh in, sorry, Andrew, is we hear that there's employment in the health sector, in the education sector. But what about other sectors? we are talking about hitting the 3 million metric ton mark. How many engineers are being employed? Do we know? How many accountants are being employed? How come we are not intentional about these other areas? Maybe I've missed it, but I didn't hear that. The only areas that are being talked about is education and health. But what about all these other sectors that are critical to our economy?
Must you be calling upon the private sector to, because real jobs are in the private sector? Government can only
really.
go as much.
The government is the biggest employer. That I know. The private sector won't do it.
The Constituency Development Fund has been increased from 36.1 million to 40 million per constituency. Now, this is despite concerns about accountability and effectiveness of the CDF. Was this necessary to increase, CDF when we haven't found a formula to ensure that we effectively utilize even these huge sums of money that now are sitting in our constituencies?
As I've always said, the Constituency Development Fund is a fantastic initiative. It's intended to develop our communities. And the target is women, the youth. They are the ones crying out about unemployment. Even the differently abled are included in there. But what we continue to see is, yes, year on year it goes up, but we are not getting the corresponding reports. How much was actually disbursed? Who actually accessed this money that was disbursed by the CDF? Because yes, we've seen ambulances have been bought, even police vehicles, which I wonder, should the CDF be funding police vehicles? I have difficulty with that. But coming back to the issue, it's been increased. Yes, what does this mean? What is the report looking like? What's the demographic? Is there accountability? Just to say, today, in the paper I've seen there's a chairman that's been fired. And we continue to see these reports. There was fraud here, this has happened here, but we continue to give. Another area, in addition to CDF, is we heard of loans, CEC. And it's on record that 80% plus defaulted. Now, what has happened to that default? We heard that the names had disappeared of these people who had gotten these loans. Surely, is that correct? This is taxpayers' money. You and I pay taxes. Surely we should have answers. We need to see the prudent use of our national resources. We're talking about poverty. CDF can change that because it will provide employment for a youth. If he sets up something, starts a small business, Kantemba, that is employment. And we know that when you employ one person, by extension, there is provision for at least 7 other people, directly or indirectly. But we continue to see the gaps. Another issue we find is we don't know. So CDF is the same for all the constituencies.
Yeah.
So for example, if constituency A only accesses 10 million kwacha, what happens to the 30 million? Is it kept for constituency A, or does it go to constituency B that has more needs? We don't have those answers, so we don't really know. We haven't seen the report. Last, in the Auditor General's report, it revealed a lot of anomalies.
Yep.
Have these acted on? Have they been acted on before we've increased this allocation? I don't know. But I'm honestly not seeing a lot of people being answerable for some of the mistakes that are made. The other thing we've talked about is when you look at the CDF guidelines, there is a provision in there. It's in black and white. I hope you've read it, Andrew. But there's a 5% provision for admin, meaning you are able to employ qualified accountants. You cannot have these huge resources, but you don't have qualified people. Why don't we have qualified accountants being the ones that are there? There's finances, but we don't have qualified accountants. Do we have qualified engineers? I'm sure bridges are being built. Roads are being graded. Do we have qualified architects? These are some of the questions that we need answers for. And it would be important to see a report that is comprehensive enough. And I'll reiterate, it's a good initiative. I personally want to see it work because it's helping my relatives in the village, in Lusaka as well.
Those concerns that you have, so you don't see why we must increase this allocation when we haven't dealt with those problems that align underneath?
We haven't dealt with the pain points. We can't continue to feed this animal called CDF when we've got so many leakages. It's like the analogy of putting water in a basket. Maybe there will be a bit, but most of it, it's leaking, you know. We want to see this work. We celebrated in 2021 when the increase was announced. We said, finally, we're going to see development. So we want to see that work. But as with everything else, there have to be checks and balances.
Checks and balances.
Yes.
Maybe back again to you, Madam President. Would you recommend reforms to be done in the area of CDF? And I'll give an example. I'll give an example of, let me pick on two constituencies. Matera, for example, has a population of registered voters of over 150,000 registered voters. And I'll pick on Luampa constituency, has about 30,000 registered voters. Yet these constituencies get the same amount of CDF. Don't you think this widens the inequality gap, where there's this huge population that gets the same amount and there's this small population that still yet gets the same amount? Don't you think we need to have some reforms in terms of how the allocation of CDF must be to, for example, areas that are highly populated and those that are not?
No, I totally agree, and that's why I gave the analogy of constituency A and B. Now, in doing that, we should not just look at the demographic. We have to look at what the needs are. Because we may be going to a big constituency, but the roads are done, the youth are thriving in that area, there are schools, the hospitals, everything is working. So we need to look at what are the needs. It shouldn't just be blanket, this constituency gets this one gets exactly the same amount. But we need to interrogate. We've been at it for 5 years. We should know what's working and what isn't working. We can't just afford to just continue and say we're increasing year on year without us seeing, yes, the real value, and also addressing the pain points.
It's not about addressing the pain point. We said we're going to come back to this point later on the, on whether you think as Zica, this budget addressed the key economic and social challenges the country is facing today. The country currently is facing load shedding. People have been load shedded for 18 hours daily until recently, when 21 communities have been exempted from this load shedding. Now they're receiving 10 to 15 hours of power, but the majority of the country has been load shedded 16 hours. Is this a source of concern to you as Zica in relation to this budget?
Okay, that's a good question. I must confirm that it seems the load shedding issue has been a pain point even for the president in his address. He did mention that he gets sleepless nights over the load shedding. So, but what I'm happy about this budget and the ministers addressed is that to curb the deficit, there's about 125 megawatts which was launched in December. There's another 1,500 megawatts expected, and even Mamba Corridor should come on board with about 300 megawatts of power in 2026. And then there's also a mention of the interconnector. I think the minister did mention that we need to do an interconnector between Zambia and Tanzania and countries like Tanzania, so that we can tap into that power pool so that we're able to alleviate the issue of load shedding. I think the national budget did touch on the energy sector, and I think if all things go well, we should be a thing of the past. Yeah.
This must become a thing of the past. The beauty is that whilst there's talks of some of those projects that have been in the pipeline, obviously people do expect results to be shown. Last year's budget, Madam President, was much more different because it came at a point when we were just healing from the effects of the drought. The load shedding we're talking about came from the drought. next year things look a bit promising, because even the projections that we have is that we're going to receive, between normal to above normal rainfall. And so we don't see many challenges, going into next year in terms of what will affect the budget, but also with these issues that Mr. Mtali is talking about, of so many projects that President Hakainde Hichilema spoke about in the energy sector, and them coming to life. And so going into 2026, Madam President, do you see a much more better Zambia in terms of how things, will look like on the economic front?
I mean, definitely. When we look at Zambia, we are a resilient nation. We came from COVID. Just when we were recovering from that, then we had the drought, which caused the energy crisis.
Plus the Russia-Ukraine war?
Yes, the geopolitics. Yes, Zambia is growing. I mean, we've seen an upswing in copper.
Yeah.
We are at 800 metric tons.
Yeah.
We're going to hit the 1 million mark soon. We are talking about more licensing for the artisanal and small-scale miners. Agriculture is doing well. And then what has happened is, as we have become resilient, we have become innovative as well. We're now embracing solar. You and I were not even talking about solar. We were focused on, we need ZESCO to power our homes. But now we've seen that as well. So definitely the economy is growing. There's a lot of ownership, as you've seen, even with the interest in the budget. There was a lot of interest. We've seen a lot of calls. People are actually talking about the budgets in a lot of forums. There is interest. And I believe that as a nation, when we are interested in the affairs of the nation, therein lies growth. One other area the minister did speak about is issues of ESG, which was fantastic. Because out of the drought, we have to now look at the climate. Things are not the same. The cycle has changed, and we need to be able to change and see how we adapt to these new changes. What does this mean? We have to look at protecting our country, protecting this, our home. And the minister did announce that they are now going to introduce duty on single-use plastic bottles.
Yeah.
That is good. But then my question I would ask, as always, is we don't have a plant that produces bottles. So how are we going to manage that? We have all these solar panels. Is there a plan or policy in place for disposal? We're talking about the 3 million metric tons. There is waste being produced. We still have Black Mountain. Is there a plan or policy in place for that? So those are some of the questions that need answers. But yes, we do see growth, and we are happy that as a nation we are getting there.
Part of what was presented was seeing the impact of the export tracking framework. The minister got into mention of the fact that $16 billion, dollars did pass into our banking system with this particular, initiative of the export tracking framework. In the long term, policies like this, and from the Zica's point of view, do you see them getting to a point where we stabilize our exchange rate because of the fact that before money is externalized by these big corporates, it still comes back into our banking systems? Obviously, that was the intention of government. But in the long run, do you see this getting to work even better?
Of course, if we have a stable currency, we are a nation that imports almost everything. So the exchange rate plays a big part in our lives on a daily basis. If that can be stabilized, it's easy for planning, it's easy for business. And even as a nation, we're attractive to foreign investors, because stability is always key. Everyone wants to go where it's easy to do business. But then also coupled with that, we need to know this money, the $16 million that left the country, what taxes were paid? How much was collected of that before it left?
Before it left the country. As we conclude, as part of its public interest mandate, what role does your organization play in interpreting, communicating, providing guidance on the implications of the national budget to the public and its stakeholders? Let me begin off with you and close off with Madam President.
Okay, so as Madam President alluded to in the opening remarks, we act as advisors on economic issues regarding this country as an advisor to the government. So we do have parliamentary appearances. Even next week after this budget was pronounced, we've already received the letter, an invitation to go and comment and appear before the expanded committee on budgeting. We also do host the budget night events, like after the budget, the minister does come to meet us, and we also we discuss the budget and the like. And then, Madam President, maybe.
Yeah. In addition to that, we also have our quarterly media briefings, and I'm happy that Diamond has supported us on a couple of occasions. This is where we talk about different issues that affect our economy. But at the end of it, we are here to provide checks and balances. We want to see transparency, accountability for the good of our economy and the nation at large.
Mrs. Yande Siame Mwenya, Zica President, Mr. Nathan Mtale, Zica Tax Committee Chairperson, thank you so much for making the time to appear on tonight's edition of This Day.
Thank you very much, Andrew.
Thank you very much for having us.
Well, there you have it. We've been discussing the 2026 national budget, some of the highlights of the budget, but also what Zica's position is on the issues the minister presented to Parliament. On behalf of the entire production crew, thank you so much for watching. See you again next week on Tuesday.